The Desert Revolution. How China's rice innovation is transforming the world's harshest landscapes. Picture this. Endless stretches of sand, scorching heat that reaches 50 degrees Celsius, and soil so laden with salt that nothing, absolutely nothing, has ever grown there. This is the reality of the world's deserts. For centuries, these vast wastelands have been written off as agricultural dead zones, places where the very idea of farming seemed like a fantasy. But what if I told you that today, right now, rice, one of humanity's most important crops, is thriving in these impossible conditions? This isn't science fiction. It's happening in the deserts of China and the United Arab Emirates, where a groundbreaking agricultural revolution is quietly unfolding. At the heart of this transformation is a remarkable innovation: salt-tolerant desert rice, developed through decades of Chinese scientific research. Picture this: endless stretches of sand, scorching heat that reaches 50 degrees Celsius, and soil so laden with salt that nothing, absolutely nothing, has ever grown there. This is the reality of the world's deserts. For centuries, these vast wastelands have been written off as agricultural dead zones, places where the very idea of farming seemed like a fantasy. But what if I told you that today, right now, rice, one of humanity's most important crops, is thriving in these impossible conditions? This isn't science fiction. It's happening in the deserts of China and the United Arab Emirates, where a groundbreaking agricultural revolution is quietly unfolding. To understand the magnitude of this achievement, we need to start with some context. China stands as the planet's biggest producer and consumer of rice. The country has approximately 250 million acres dedicated to hybrid rice cultivation alone. That's roughly 57% of all rice-growing land in China. The surplus food generated from these fields each year is sufficient to sustain 70 million people. To put that in perspective, that's equivalent to feeding the entire population of Thailand, or the United Kingdom. For thousands of years, rice farming has depended on two critical ingredients: rich, fertile soil and plentiful fresh water. These requirements have confined rice cultivation to river valleys, deltas, and regions blessed with monsoon rains. But China faces a unique challenge. Within its borders lie approximately 665,000 square kilometers of highly saline and alkaline desert land, areas where traditional agriculture was simply impossible. These salt-crusted wastelands represented not just lost potential, but a stark reminder of the limits of conventional farming. The soil chemistry was all wrong. The water, when present, was too salty. The conditions were too extreme. For generations, these lands were considered forbidden zones for agriculture, places where life itself struggled to take hold. But Chinese researchers refused to accept these limitations. 4 decades of scientific persistence. The story of desert rice didn't begin yesterday. It's the culmination of more than 40 years of dedicated research, countless failures, and incremental breakthroughs. Scientists conducted over 1,100 field experiments and nearly 900 paired comparison studies. They tested thousands of rice varieties under extreme conditions. They analyzed soil chemistry, water salinity, temperature fluctuations, and plant genetics. Their mission was clear but enormously challenging: develop a rice variety that could not only survive but thrive in high salt, high alkaline desert environments. They needed a plant that could tolerate conditions that would kill ordinary rice within days. After decades of work, they succeeded. The desert rice varieties that emerged from this research possess remarkable characteristics. They can grow in soil with salinity levels that would be toxic to conventional crops. They require significantly less water than traditional rice. Perhaps most importantly, their root systems actually help rehabilitate damaged soil, gradually reducing salinity and improving the overall quality of the land. This wasn't just about creating a hardier plant. It was about reimagining what's possible in agriculture. To understand why China invested so heavily in this research, we need to talk about food security, a topic that keeps national leaders awake at night. Food security isn't just about having enough to eat today. It's about guaranteeing that your population will have access to affordable, nutritious food tomorrow, next year, and for generations to come. Countries that depend too heavily on food imports become vulnerable. Global markets can be disrupted by conflicts, climate events, trade disputes, or pandemics. A nation that cannot feed itself is, in many ways, not fully sovereign. China knows this better than most. With a population exceeding 1.4 billion people, the country consumes a staggering 700,000 tons of food every single day. That's not a typo, 700,000 tons daily. To maintain self-sufficiency, China needs to keep between 2.3 and 2.4 billion acres under cultivation. Here's the problem. China's current arable land totals only about 1.9 billion acres. There's a significant gap between what exists and what's needed. And with urbanization continuing to consume farmland at an alarming rate, that gap could widen. The solution? Find new land to farm or dramatically improve the productivity of existing land. Preferably both. This is where China's deserts enter the picture. The country has approximately 700,000 square kilometers of desert terrain. If even a fraction of this land could be converted into productive agricultural space, it would fundamentally alter China's food security equation. The strategic implications are enormous. In 2017, Chinese scientists selected a test site on the western edge of the Taklamakan Desert for what would become a landmark experiment. The Taklamakan is one of Earth's most unforgiving environments, a sea of sand so hostile that its name is said to mean place of no return in the local Uyghur language. The experimental plot they chose represented worst-case conditions. Soil salinity measured 17 parts per thousand. That's nearly half as salty as seawater. The pH value exceeded 8.0, making it strongly alkaline. By every conventional measure, this land was agriculturally worthless. The scientists planted their desert rice varieties and waited. 12 months later, something remarkable happened. The barren earth began to transform. Where there had been only lifeless sand and salt crust, green shoots emerged. The rice not only survived, it flourished. When harvest time arrived in March of 2018, the results exceeded everyone's expectations. The yield reached 549 kilograms per mu, a Chinese unit of area. For context, that's a respectable yield even under normal farming conditions, let alone in the middle of a desert. The implications were staggering. If rice could grow here, in one of the planet's harshest environments, then millions of acres of previously unusable land could potentially be brought into production. The boundaries of agriculture had just been redrawn. News of China's success spread quickly through international agricultural circles. Countries with large desert territories began to take notice. Among the most interested was the United Arab Emirates, and specifically Dubai. In September of 2018, China and Dubai formalized a partnership to bring desert rice technology to the Arabian Peninsula. This wasn't just a commercial arrangement. It was a comprehensive collaboration that included research facilities, experimental farms, and knowledge transfer programs. The initiative also received support from China's Belt and Road Initiative, reflecting its strategic importance. By 2019, a massive experimental farm had been established in Dubai's desert, complete with advanced irrigation systems, monitoring equipment, and research laboratories. Commercial investors, recognizing the potential, provided funding. The stage was set for the next phase of the desert rice revolution. But why Dubai? And why would Chinese scientists invest so much effort in helping another country develop its agricultural capacity? The Dubai Challenge. Dubai presents a case study in environmental extremes. More than 90% of the emirate is desert. Annual rainfall averages less than 100 millimeters, barely a trickle compared to the water requirements of traditional agriculture. Sandstorms are a frequent occurrence, sometimes happening multiple times per week. For Dubai's 3.5 million residents, these conditions create constant challenges. Dust fills the air. Respiratory illnesses are common. During sandstorms, the city essentially shuts down. Schools close, flights are canceled, and people are advised to stay indoors. Then there's the heat. Summer temperatures routinely exceed 50 degrees Celsius. At these temperatures, most plants simply cannot survive. Water evaporates almost immediately. The soil becomes baking hot, literally cooking any vegetation that attempts to grow. On top of all this, Dubai's desert soil contains extremely high levels of alkaline salts. Even if you could somehow provide enough water and shield plants from the heat, the soil chemistry itself would poison most crops. Growing rice here seemed absurd. Rice needs water, moderate temperatures, and neutral soil. Dubai offered none of these things. Yet Chinese scientists saw not an impossibility, but a challenge worth accepting. 3,000 experiments. When the Chinese research team arrived in Dubai in 2018, they brought seeds, equipment, and most importantly experience from their work in the Taklamakan Desert. But they quickly discovered that Dubai presented unique challenges. The first plantings failed. Seeds struggled to germinate in the extreme heat. Those that did sprout grew slowly, weakened by the harsh conditions. Some withered entirely. The desert rice varieties that had succeeded in China weren't quite right for Dubai's specific environment. The team regrouped and began the painstaking work of adaptation. They conducted more than 3,000 experiments, testing different varieties, planting times, irrigation methods, and soil treatments. They crossbred plants, selected for specific traits, and gradually developed rice lines that could handle Dubai's particular combination of stresses. After hundreds of breeding cycles and countless failures, they achieved success. A new variety of salt-tolerant rice, specifically adapted to Dubai's conditions, emerged from their work. The transformation was dramatic. Desert land that had never produced anything suddenly burst into green. Rice plants grew tall and healthy. The harvest yields, while initially modest, proved that the concept worked. By 2019, the experimental farm had expanded to cover 1 square kilometer. Plans were drawn up for even larger expansions. The highest yielding plots produced 500 kilograms per mu, comparable to the results in China's Taklamakan Experiment. Dubai's government, impressed by the results, announced an ambitious goal. By 2020, they aimed to have rice cultivation covering approximately 10% of the UAE's desert land. That's 83,000 square kilometers, an area larger than the entire country of Austria. The economics of desert rice. Let's talk numbers because the economic implications of this technology are profound. Dubai currently consumes more than 40 million tons of grain annually. Remarkably, 90% of this grain is imported. The emirate grows almost none of its own food. Everything from rice to wheat to vegetables arrives by ship or plane from abroad. This creates vulnerability. Global grain prices fluctuate based on harvests, weather, speculation, and geopolitical tensions. Supply chains can be disrupted. Countries that export food today might restrict exports tomorrow if their own populations face shortages. Dubai's population is also growing rapidly. Current projections suggest the UAE's population will reach 5 million by 2030. With more people will come greater food demand, potentially 59.2 million tons of grain annually, nearly 50% more than today's consumption. Now imagine desert rice production scaling up as planned. If even a portion of the projected 83,000 square kilometers comes into production, Dubai could generate between 7.5 million and 20 million kilograms of rice annually in the initial phases. As techniques improve and more land is converted, production could increase exponentially. Eventually, Dubai could achieve something that seemed impossible just a decade ago: food self-sufficiency. Instead of importing nearly all its grain, the emirate could grow much of what it needs domestically. This would insulate Dubai from global market volatility and supply disruptions. But the benefits extend beyond food security. Desert rice, precisely because it grows in such unusual conditions, may command premium prices in international markets. Consumers increasingly value unique, sustainably produced foods. Rice grown in the Arabian desert without extensive chemical inputs could become a high-value export. Conservative estimates suggest that desert rice exports could eventually generate $1 billion or more in foreign exchange earnings for Dubai. This would create a new economic sector, generating jobs in farming, processing, transportation, and related industries. Desert communities that previously had few economic opportunities could become agricultural centers. Beyond food, the implications of desert rice really do extend far beyond just nutrition and economics. This technology, honestly, offers a potential solution to one of Dubai's most persistent environmental challenges: desertification and dust storms. Dubai experiences more than 60 sandstorm days each year. During these events, visibility drops to nearly zero. Fine dust manages to infiltrate buildings, even when all the windows are closed. The air becomes hazardous to breathe. The economic cost is substantial. Businesses shut down, tourism suffers, and healthcare costs rise because of all those respiratory illnesses. But desert rice offers an unexpected remedy. As a perennial crop that requires continuous cultivation, it creates permanent ground cover. The root systems of the rice plants penetrate deep into the sand, stabilizing dunes and preventing erosion. Wind can no longer easily pick up sand particles and whip them into storms. On top of that, rice cultivation fundamentally alters soil composition. The plants add organic matter as they grow and decay, and microbial life starts to flourish. Over time, the soil chemistry shifts, becoming less alkaline and less saline. What begins as dead sand gradually transforms into living soil. This process creates a positive feedback loop. As soil quality improves, it can support not just rice, but other plants as well. Gradually, ecosystems develop. The barren desert begins to support biodiversity. Scientists have actually observed this effect in China's experimental fields, where insects, birds, and small mammals have returned to areas that were previously lifeless. Just imagine Dubai's future if, say, 10% of its desert became green agricultural land. Vast rice fields would replace endless sand. The air would become clearer and healthier. The city would be surrounded not by hostile wasteland, but by productive, life-supporting landscapes. Summer temperatures might even moderate a bit as vegetation provides cooling through evapotranspiration. And this isn't just speculation, it's already happening on a small scale in the experimental farms. The question is simply how far and how fast the transformation can proceed. The China-Dubai partnership, represents more than just a bilateral agreement. It's actually designed as a proof of concept for the entire Arab world. Many Middle Eastern and North African countries face similar challenges to Dubai: extensive deserts, water scarcity, high food import dependency, and vulnerable food security. The region as a whole imports the majority of its grain. Climate change threatens to make conditions even tougher, with rising temperatures and decreasing rainfall predicted for the coming decades. Desert rice technology could be transformative across this entire region. Countries like Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, and Algeria all have vast desert territories that could potentially be converted to agriculture. The food security implications are profound, not just for individual nations, but for regional stability. Food scarcity has historically been a driver of social unrest and conflict. Countries that can feed their populations are more stable, more prosperous, and better positioned to address other development challenges. If desert rice enables Arab nations to achieve greater food self-sufficiency, it could contribute to peace and stability throughout the region. The agreement between China and Dubai specifically mentions promoting sea rice, varieties that can tolerate not just desert conditions, but also brackish and saline water throughout the Arab world. This knowledge transfer represents a significant commitment to regional food security. Chinese scientists aren't just selling a product, they're sharing knowledge, building capacity, and establishing long-term partnerships. Research centers in Dubai are training local scientists and agronomists who will carry this work forward. The technology is being adapted and improved to meet local conditions. This is capacity building at scale. The bigger picture here is, well, feeding 9 billion people. Let's just step back for a moment and consider the global context. Earth's population, as you know, continues to grow. Current projections suggest we'll reach 9.7 billion people by the year 2050. All these people, of course, will need food. Meanwhile, climate change is making traditional agricultural regions less reliable. Droughts are becoming more frequent, rainfall patterns are shifting, and some currently productive farmland may become unsuitable for cultivation. At the same time, we're running out of easy options for agricultural expansion. Most of the world's good farmland is already in use. The remaining forests and wetlands that could be converted to agriculture are, ironically, exactly the ecosystems we need to preserve for climate regulation and biodiversity. This creates a real paradox. We need to produce more food, but we're running out of places to grow it using conventional methods. Desert rice represents a potential way out of this paradox. Instead of converting rainforests or wetlands to farmland, we could convert deserts, lands that currently support almost no life and provide minimal ecosystem services. Deserts cover about 1/3 of Earth's land surface. If even a small fraction of this area could be brought into production, global food security would honestly be transformed. China's success proves the concept is viable, and Dubai demonstrates it can work in different geographical contexts. The big question now is how quickly and widely this technology can be deployed. Other countries are watching closely. Similar projects are being discussed in North Africa, Central Asia, and even parts of Australia. Research institutions worldwide are studying the Chinese methodology and considering how it might be adapted to their local conditions. Of course, this isn't a silver bullet solution. Significant challenges remain. Water is perhaps the most critical constraint. While desert rice requires less water than conventional varieties, it still needs irrigation. Dubai addresses this partly through desalination, but this process is energy-intensive and expensive. Scaling up to cover vast desert areas would require enormous quantities of water, either from desalination, deep aquifers, or extremely efficient irrigation systems. There are also questions about long-term soil health. While initial results are promising, we really need decades of data to fully understand how desert rice cultivation affects soil chemistry over time. Will salinity levels continue to decrease, or will they eventually stabilize at levels that still constrain productivity? Can soil organic matter build up sufficiently to support diverse crop rotations? Economic viability at scale is another concern. Experimental farms benefit from government subsidies and research funding. But for desert rice to transform regions, it needs to be profitable for ordinary farmers. This requires not just successful cultivation, but also processing infrastructure, market access, and competitive pricing against imported grain. Climate change itself presents uncertainties. The Middle East is projected to become even hotter and drier in coming decades. Will desert rice varieties be able to adapt to these increasingly extreme conditions? Or will there be a threshold beyond which even these hardy plants cannot survive? Despite these challenges, the potential rewards justify continued investment and research. The technology is improving rapidly. Costs are coming down. Most importantly, the fundamental concept has been proven. Rice can grow in deserts. There's also a diplomatic dimension to this story that really deserves attention. Agricultural cooperation has historically been one of the most effective forms of development assistance. Unlike military aid or financial packages, sharing agricultural technology builds lasting capacity. It creates jobs, improves nutrition, and strengthens economies from the ground up. China's willingness to share desert rice technology, rather than hoarding it for domestic advantage, has built goodwill throughout the Arab world and beyond. This is soft power in action. Influence built not through coercion, but through mutually beneficial cooperation. The Belt and Road Initiative, often criticized in Western media, is showing its potential in this context. The desert rice partnerships represent exactly the kind of South-South cooperation that can address shared challenges. Countries with similar environmental constraints are pooling knowledge and resources to solve problems that affect them all. This cooperation extends beyond government-to-government relations. Chinese and Emirati scientists work side by side in research facilities. Students exchange between universities. Business partnerships form around agricultural technology. These people-to-people connections build understanding and friendship that transcends political rhetoric. In an era of increasing geopolitical tension, these agricultural partnerships remind us that cooperation remains possible and productive. Climate change, food security, and environmental degradation are challenges that affect everyone. Solutions developed jointly benefit everyone. So where does this go from here? In the near term, we can expect continued expansion of desert rice cultivation in Dubai and potentially other Gulf states. The experimental phase is essentially over. The focus now shifts to scaling up. More farmland will be converted. Irrigation systems will be built out. Supply chains for seeds, equipment, and harvested grain will be established. Within 5 to 10 years, desert rice could become a significant part of the UAE's food supply. If the 10% target is achieved, it would represent one of the fastest agricultural transformations in modern history. The technology will also continue to improve. Second and third generation varieties of desert rice will likely require even less water, tolerate even higher temperatures, and produce even better yields. Advances in genetics, including potentially gene editing techniques, could accelerate this improvement. Other countries will adopt and adapt the technology. Each regional variation will contribute new insights and innovations. Desert rice cultivated in the Sahara will face different challenges than rice in the Arabian or Gobi deserts, leading to locally optimized varieties and practices. Perhaps most excitingly, success with rice could pave the way for other desert crops.